Okay, I'm here doing kind of a, let's call it special feature. Um, and really the question is, if you've looked at my site, you're noticing 5 short videos. And I kind of need to explain why are there 5 short videos on Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. So in a few minutes, I'm going to try to just sum up why that's significant and why we went out there and did this. So first of all, uh, the significance probably of Chaco for me, even though I've read some books on Chaco and have been there one time prior. This is our second time in Chaco. But the significance probably to me and the importance of it was demonstrated by the son of the man that owns the site in Salem, New Hampshire. The man's name is Dennis Stone, and he has a son. And of course, Stonehenge of America, in and of itself, is an absolutely fascinating place. And I would encourage you to get on the internet and read about it. And also, L.A. Marzulli has done on the Trail of Nephilim videos, including Stonehenge of America. Now, Dennis Stone's son was playing around with Google Earth one day. And so he drew a line from the center place in Stonehenge of America and drew it on Google Earth, extending through this monolithic stone on their property there that indicates the sunrise of the summer solstice. So he, on Google Earth, drew this, and he kept extending the line northeast and extending the line northeast. And finally, it got over the Atlantic and came into what is the area of Great Britain. And it went right through the 3 middle stones of Stonehenge of England. Now, this seems like a remarkable coincidence, doesn't it? At least I think it is. So then he decided to do the opposite. And that is, he got on Google Earth and turned it around and ran the line from the center spot in Stonehenge of America, there in New Hampshire, and went through the winter solstice megalithic marker there on the property and kept extending that line southwest and went right through Chaco Canyon. Now, that to me seems like it's got to be more than a coincidence, and it created even more fascination in my mind of what is Chaco, what is the significance of it, what truths are hidden there, how do we understand what it is, and so I'm kind of trying to go through that a little bit with you. But first, I want to talk to you first about, quote, mythology. And of course, many people that have studied have realized that there's a lot of truth in, quote, mythology. There's truth embedded in these images and these stories that we gain from all over the world. Now, in Genesis 10 and 11, we have mention of this, who I believe, at least, is an Antichrist figure, and his name is Nimrod. And Nimrod, in tradition, was married to this woman named Semiramis. And the story goes that Nimrod was called the sun god. And he, through one of the rays of his sunlight, magically inseminated Semiramis, who's his consort. Some people say that she's his mother. Some people say that she's his wife. And a lot of people say both of them are true. At any rate, they produced this individual, this demigod named Tammuz. So in mythology, you have here in the very beginning the stories of the sun god and of the lunar goddess And also associated with her is the idea of Mother Earth, which many people modernly call Gaia, modern Earth. And of course, we find that the sun god tradition and the moon goddess tradition goes all the way through almost every major civilization, culture, ancient ones that you can think of. And of course, there are temples built that are calendar systems, and they both talk about the phases of the moon, and they predict the solstices and the equinoxes of the solar year. Now, there's also something else that some of them do, and Chaco does this, and that is it also predicts this very unique thing called the lunar declination cycle. And the lunar declination cycle is an 18.61 year cycle. And I think that the easiest way to explain it, though it's more technical than this, let's compare it to what we call the solar year or the solar declination cycle. Now, in the solar year, let's say that you had an east-facing window, a large one, and you had a crayon. And every day at sunrise, you would mark where, with the crayon on the glass that you're looking through, where the sun arose from. And of course, what you'd find is that on the equinoxes, both the fall and the vernal equinox, you would find the spring equinox, you would find that it would be in a spot that would be running directly east and west. Okay. Now, as you move more towards summer, you would realize that as you kept marking the glass every day, that it kept moving more to the north. And by the time of the summer solstice, it would be actually create an angle of 23.5 degrees. Then it would do what's called a standstill, in this case only for a couple days. And then you would start to realize that it's starting to rise, move, but each day moving south. It moves back to the equinox position, and then it starts to go to your right as you're looking to the east. And it goes finally to this standstill place that we call the winter solstice. And it would be 23.5 degrees from its east-west point. So it would make an arc, okay, of approximately about, I think if I add it together, it would be about 47 degrees. Now, the lunar declination cycle is different, and it's more complicated because the Earth is at a 23.5 angle that's called from the sun. Okay, the sun's apparent movement in the sky is called the ecliptic, and over a 1 year cycle, it moves 23 degrees north of the ecliptic, and then eventually moves 23 degrees south of the ecliptic for a total move of 47-degree angle. But the moon is 5 degrees off the tilt of the Earth. So it makes an even bigger cycle, but it moves much more slowly in this cycle. It actually takes 18.61 years to complete the entire cycle. And it inscribes an angle of 10 more degrees, of approximately 57 degrees when it's finally finished. Now, Chaco is a unique place because it actually predicts when and where and how the lunar declination cycle works. It also predicts the solar too, but it predicts both of them. Now, in Ezekiel 8:14 through 17, if you want to look up that passage, you're going to see a story where Ezekiel the prophet is wailing about these women who are themselves wailing about the death of Tammuz. And we already talked about who Tammuz is. He's the alleged son of Nimrod and Semiramis. But they're at the temple and they're mourning pagan deities. And of course, a group of women. And of course, it shows by Ezekiel's time how much paganism was included into the culture, into Jewish culture, and was being practiced. Matter of fact, of course, Tammuz, according to this legend, dies at one point and then later is reborn. So Tammuz really is an image of the false Messiah. The real Messiah, of course, as we know, is Jesus Christ, who dies and comes back to life. But Tammuz has the tradition of doing the same thing, so he's a false Messiah. Now, the Chaco culture in northwestern New Mexico was created by, physically built by, it appears, we think, and I'll talk about that in a minute, the ancient Anasazi. The Anasazi were the ancient relatives, especially of the Navajo people today. Now, so we see here that there is a place as you come into Chaco Canyon, and I'm going to show you a picture here. I'll try to hold it up to the camera of okay. So as you come in, and I'll hold this up and see if it can be seen reasonably well. Okay, if I'm holding it reasonably, and it shows a picture of a diagram of Chaco Canyon. As a matter of fact, if you look at it, if I'm holding it decently at all, okay, you're going to see down here in the bottom is this place that I have my finger on, and it's called Fajita Butte. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of Fajita Butte. It's this. Again, if I'm holding it up, I'm sorry, I'm holding it in the wrong place. Sorry about that. I'm holding it here. This is a picture of Fajita Butte. Okay, I'll pull it back a little bit. And of course, this, I'm sorry, I was doing incorrectly. It was the diagram of Chaco Canyon. Now, Fajita Butte is a very interesting place. It's 450 feet tall, and on top of it are a series of interesting structures. There are 3 monolithic slabs of stone weighing tons and tons each that are set on their edge. In other words, pointing out from this wall on the upper part of the butte. On the back of that wall is inscribed a series of spirals. And what happens is that during the time of the equinoxes and the solstices, the light coming through these 3 images creates a literal light dagger. And that light dagger points, if it's this, it points to one place. If it's the summer solstice, it points to another spiral area. If it's the winter solstice, it points to another area. If it's the autumnal equinox, in another area, if it's the spring or vernal equinox. So it very precisely predicts noon on each one of these days. That is pretty good trick. that is very unique. Now, next to it on the back wall is another spiral. And I'm going to show it to you. It's the only other really unique spiral, and it's put on the back wall next to the other spirals, and I hope I'm holding it in a way in which you can see it. If you notice, that spiral, okay, is an image of this building. And hopefully you can see that fairly well and see what it looks like. This building is called Pueblo Benito. There are 14 buildings in this complex all through this canyon system, as I said. It's diagrammed right here. These houses, many of them, are called great houses. And they're big. As a matter of fact, Pueblo Benito, that I just showed you, is, we estimate, because of the wall structure that's there, that there are over 700 rooms originally built into this one area, with, of course, a large number of kivas. They're also built into it too. Now, a kiva is a stone-lined circular structure built into the earth. And the kivas were where the medicine men or the shamans would produce a particular ritual, sometimes using psychedelic substances like peyote. And in it, they would literally channel a demon through the bottom of a soul well. This was a practice all over the Southwest. And in this whole area, this whole canyon area that I just showed you a picture of, there are over 100 soul wells. So there was a whole lot of demonic activity that was going on at this time. Now, this time that we're talking about seems to stretch from about 850 AD, 800 to 850 AD, to about 1200 or 1250 AD. And it was an active area. But the interesting thing is that even though it had these great houses in it, matter of fact, Pueblo Benito, which is the house that a picture is inscribed in the wall in Fajita Butte, the only inscription of one of the great houses on top of Fajita Butte. But Pueblo Benito, as I said, had 700 rooms, or maybe more than 700 originally. It was 4 stories tall and was all covered by a roof. It took in almost 4 acres. It was a huge place. Now, if you notice something about Pueblo Benito, is that it had an interesting structure to it. Of course, here again is an aerial picture of Pueblo Benito. It's looking down from the cliff that's above Pueblo Benito. And as you're looking down, you see an entire back wall that's built like a semicircle, okay? And it's curved. And there's a front wall. The front wall is facing to the south, okay? So the curved wall is on the north and the straight wall is in the south. In the videos in which I showed you, in 4 of them, I moved around inside Pueblo Benito, showing with the compass that the wall that ran north-south, which represents the arrow, if you'll notice, again, you see that this picture that's inscribed on the top of Fajita Butte is that of a bow and arrow. Okay, it's a bow and arrow, and if you notice, that's exactly what the nature of Pueblo Benito is. It's bow-shaped with this wall that runs down, essentially almost down the middle of it, which represents the arrow. Now, I think that we need to talk about the idea of what does this spiritually mean to the Navajo and to their ancestors, the ancient Anasazi. Well, arrows represent traveling in an unimpaired way at great speed to reach out or communicate or to attain the divine, quote, the gods. And we find that that it means also a quest for deeper meaning and aspiration for, quote unquote, the great truths. Now, we have an example of that in the Bible. It's found in Genesis 3, verse 5, and let me read it to you. For God knows that in the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. That is the attainment of enlightened truth that Satan, the Nakash, induced Eve to interest her, and indeed to go on that quest by eating the fruit of the tree. Now, it's interesting that even though Chaco, based on debris pile information and debris pit information, there's no evidence that any more than 2,000 people ever lived in Chaco at any time. And it was never permanently populated. People would come and go to Chaco. It was a ritual site, okay, where rituals were performed. And eventually, around 1300 BC, according to Navajo oral tradition, it was shut down. It was, quote, boarded up, and we find evidence even in some of the doorways that they closed them off, try to somehow stop what was going on. But Navajos say the reason for this was what they called, quote, an unspeakable evil, which was occurring in Chaco Canyon. And of course, we also note an interesting fact that's come out through a series of archaeological digs and evidence that Dr. Chris Turner, archaeologist from from Arizona State University, visited Chaco many, many times, and he was able to find bones of Native Americans there that had scrape marks all up and down the bones, thigh bones, arm bones, femur bones. And we compared the marks made by sharp instruments on these bones. They're identical to the marks made by Native Americans to get meat off of buffalo or deer or other animals. In other words, someone scraped the flesh off of human beings. And we also know a second thing happened, and that is they found a number of different evidences. They're called coprolites. In other words, they're ancient feces. And they did experiments on these in a laboratory and proved, I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the flesh that was scraped off the bones was eaten by people, and then the feces demonstrated through a certain protein substance that indeed it was human flesh. So we find an interesting question, and I think it's a question to you as you look at these 5 segments that I created there at Chaco Canyon, and that is, to answer why is it that an elaborate mathematical design occurred by Chaco Native Americans who we know never possessed a written language, never possessed geometry, never possessed trigonometry. And how is it that they could have created these structures? And, you know, Pueblo Benito is only one of them. There's 13 others in this area of this canyon, and many, many others, actually over 100 in the greater San Juan River Basin, which all of these are included in. Could these be a spiritual story which undergirds the meaning of this place? There's more work that's going to be done on this. Hopefully this entire place and the entire story of it is going to be filmed this fall. So stay tuned and pray for that happening so that we can better understand the mystery of Chaco Canyon. Thank you very much for watching this, and I hope that it puts a perspective on the 5 videos that I filmed there at Chaco.
We are here at Chaco Canyon. We've just come in this direction from where the Fajita Butte is. But on top of Fajita Butte, there is an inscription that is 10 meters from the back walls where the light daggers point and the shadows point. And that inscription is the inscription of this building. Therefore, I think that this building is key to what's centrally going on here, the nexus of what goes on in Chaco. Now, I'm looking straight down this wall, and you can see the wall behind me, all right? I have my compass that is sitting right here, right in front of me, and it is showing due south, okay? Obviously, this is a north-south axis wall of Pueblo Benito. Now, what we're going to do is that we're going to now find the east-west wall and make certain that it aligns perfectly like it says. This wall is no more than 2/10 of 1 degree off perfect north and south. Probably a little bit less than 2/10 of 1 degree, which is remarkable, being that these people had no written language. We know of no mathematics that they had. They didn't have, to our knowledge, any access to geometry or trigonometry. At least we have no evidence of it. And so the question becomes, how was this all laid out? And in what way? So we're going to go now look at the east-west wall and go ahead and check it with the compass. I'm standing here by Kiva A. Kiva A is when you walk down the north-south wall. The north-south wall is marked like an arrow running through this, but it's kind of a backwards arrow. The bend on the back is the bow, and that's the way it was set up. And we can talk more about what that means in terms of Anasazi understanding of cosmology. But Kiva A, as has been pointed out by L.A. Marzulli, is also almost identical in its appearance to the pyramid and Kiva structure in Corral, Peru. It's 17 meters in diameter. It's a big Kiva. It's the largest Kiva in this whole place. Right, I'm standing now by the south wall of Pueblo Benito. This wall, as you've seen or see on the compass, is perfectly east-west. The wall in front of me, or behind where it's being, okay, there you go, she's turning. That wall is perfectly north-south. Therefore, between this wall and that wall, we have exact cardinal points of the compass built into this very structure. Okay, behind to my left is all the rounding of what's called the bow It stretches all the way around the back and obviously faces the cliff part of this site. It's remarkable, with no trigonometry, no geometry, that they would be able to form an exact east-west wall and an exact north-south wall. How did they do that? I'm standing here by the wall, the major front wall, which is the east-west wall of Chaco. You can see how tall originally these things were. When early settlers came, they were, they said they were 4 stories and sometimes 5 stories in heights, obviously then with roofs on them. It's important to realize that the closest timber that has ever been found around here is approximately 80 kilometers or more from here. And therefore, they had to take the timber from a long distance, they had to cut it, they had to somehow transport it, fit it in, make the walls, make all of the, as you can see in some places here, the round logs that went through the walls to help hold the structure up. And at no time, as far as we can tell from archaeological records, based on debris pits, and things like that, at no point was there ever a time in which there were more than 2,000 people that ever existed here at once. Almost no one ever lived here. So the question is, how do you get 2,000 people to transport logs from 50 or 60 miles away and to cut this stone to make this huge structure? And this is just one of the great houses. There's 14 of them here on this site. A great kiva that is at the entrance place of this other great house called Chaco Canyon. And of course this kiva, I'm going to guess, is almost as big, if not as big, as the kiva in Pueblo Benito. The significance of why I'm filming this, and you can see that there's structures around. There are a number of different structures around, but also there are 14 different great houses in the Chaco Canyon area, just in this region of it. And what we can see here that I think is unique and proves a point is that the internal angles of 9 of these houses, actually, yeah, 9 of these houses, are, when you measure from side to side or diagonally across, or the different measures you'll see on this, either measure 28.5 approximately 23.5 approximately to 24 degrees. What's the significance? Well, it repeats over these 9 structures. And what is 23.5 degrees? It's the tilt of the Earth in relationship to the sun's ecliptic. That's the significance of it. Now, is that coincidental? Did it just happen? I think not. I think there was a grand design here, and that's why it happened. Now, there also are 4 other great houses that you can see over here, and many of them are at 34 or 39 degrees in the internal structures there. What is the significance of that? Well, the significance is if you add 23, almost 24, to 5, you get 29 degrees. Again, some of these houses are 29-degree internal angles. Some of them are greater. Some of these represent some of the angles that are measured in terms of the moon and its different phases and its different cycle in the 18.61 year declination cycle of the moon. Remember, the moon is 5 degrees off the ecliptic of the Earth. Okay? That's part of why it's very difficult many times to figure out the movement of the moon and the regularity of it, because it's measured 5 degrees off, and it makes certain perturbations occur in terms of what we see as being a lunar cycle. The point is this: as we look at this chart and we look at these measured angles, you tell me how they were measured. We have no evidence of geometry by these Native American peoples. We have no evidence of trigonometry. And yet these houses were built at precise angles, which represent the angles of between the Earth, the moon, the lunar orbit, the solar year. All these things are angles in that area that are represented in the structures and the internal angles of many of these houses, these large houses around us.